Let us check in with Simon Marks, LBC's US correspondent. Let us ask him about the fact that more than 300 anti-ICE protests are planned across the whole of the US this weekend. Simon, thank you so much for joining me. Good to see you. Gosh, it seems to have gone from bad to worse since last week, really.
I was just sitting here thinking I can't actually remember which particular outrage we were talking about a week ago. Yeah. So much has happened in the intervening 7 days. But I mean, I suspect we were talking about Minneapolis and what had happened to Alex Pretty exactly a week ago on the streets of Minneapolis. His killing, of course, at the hands of those Border Patrol agents, and those protests that we're going to be seeing across the United States today. And there were substantial protests also yesterday in Minneapolis, in Los Angeles, in many other towns and cities across the country, are really not only underscoring the public fury over the killing now of 2 American citizens in Minneapolis this month at the hands of the Border Patrol and ICE, respectively, but also those protesters are expressing skepticism about this notion that President Trump in some way is softening his approach to Minneapolis. I mean, we've seen the Commander-at-Large of the Border Patrol, Greg Bovino, this sort of strutting, swaggering presence who never hesitates to lecture the protesters, the journalists in Minneapolis, elected officials in Minneapolis and Minnesota, as he has sought really to champion the efforts of law enforcement in its bruising and thuggish way in Minneapolis to enforce President Trump's mass deportation policies. We've seen him demoted and removed from the city. But more broadly, President Trump has not delivered on rising calls from within his own Republican Party for other senior figures, including the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, to be fired. The president moved his immigration czar, Tom Homan, to Minneapolis. I mean, there were numerous narratives here suggesting that he was a more moderate voice than Greg Bovino. But to be honest, I mean, that's only a matter of perspective. Mr. Homan himself has been pretty outspoken and pretty extreme over the course of the last year. And when President Trump told one media outlet, I think it was on Wednesday, that he was getting ready to de-escalate in Minneapolis, he then immediately disavowed it the following day, telling reporters that no, that's not what he's going to do. And remember, the federal government is saying to the authorities in Minneapolis and Minnesota, we will remove some of the ICE and Border Patrol agents and engage in much more targeted actions in Minneapolis if you do all sorts of things for us. Yeah. And one of the things that they are demanding from Minneapolis and Minnesota is that the Border Patrol and ICE should be given access to the jails so that if there are illegal immigrants serving prison sentences, they can be immediately removed and deported. And the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota, both of them Democrats, are saying it's not our job to enforce federal law on immigration. We've got our own. You know, Minneapolis is a sanctuary city. We're not going to give you that opportunity. So, I mean, there are all sorts of other requests that the government is making that the authorities in Minnesota do not seem likely to meet. So there is every possibility that this standoff is going to continue, that we're going to see escalating efforts by the Border Patrol and ICE to remove people from the streets. And there is, unfortunately, every risk of another American citizen peacefully observing Border Patrol and ICE operations from being killed in exactly the same way as Alex Pretty was a week ago.
And one of those citizens is a character called Don Lemon. Now, he's not really known to us, but he's exceptionally well known in America, isn't he? Just tell us about what's happened to him. I mean, he certainly has given a most dramatic speech about the implications of silencing him. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so Don Lemon is, as you know, Vanessa, a former CNN anchor. And I just want to underscore that this is a story not only about Mr. Lemon, it is also a story about another journalist, Georgia Fort, an award-winning independent journalist who's based in Minneapolis. They were both last Sunday reporting on a protest that took place when demonstrators burst into a church in Minneapolis, a Baptist church, and they specifically chose that church because one of the pastors there works for ICE. Several of the pastors there have other jobs as well, and one of them works for ICE. And I think this happened 2 Sundays ago, not last Sunday. As a result, the government of Donald Trump argued that the civil rights of the worshippers in that church were being infringed by the protesters who broke in, and they threatened to bring criminal action against the protest leaders, but also, within the last 48 hours, have arrested both Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, who were simply there in the church reporting on what was taking place. They were not demonstrators, they were not protesters, they are journalists. And this comes on the back of 3 or 4 weeks ago, the FBI raiding the home of a Washington Post reporter here who has been chronicling the views of fired and threatened federal government workers about the way in which they've been treated by the Trump administration over the last year. Mr. Lemon emerged from his first court hearing in Los Angeles yesterday. They actually arrested him while he was covering the Grammys to issue a passionate defence, not just of himself, but of the right of all journalists in this country under the First Amendment to go about their professional work unmolested and unthreatened by government. But the fact that Don Lemon, who has national prominence, and Georgia Fort, who certainly is very widely known in Minneapolis, Minnesota and the surrounding region, were targeted by the government for this after twice the government tried to get a judge to approve arrest warrants. The judge wouldn't do it, so they then impaneled a federal jury, 3rd time's a charm, to try and get those arrest warrants approved, those indictments laid down, is being seen here as an absolutely klaxon.
I'm wondering whether
journalists,
Simon, whether journalists from all different political persuasions might take up the cudgels on behalf of Don Lemon and Georgia. That they, you know, if you have a column, you've got to write about that, because how can you not? When he said, "I will not be silenced," I can't be silenced. You just think, God, you know, everybody needs to get on board with this, don't they? Because otherwise, it's the tip of the most terrifying iceberg. If they start silencing journalists and locking them up, you're really in the most terrific trouble. So, has there been an enormous mass outcry on all sides about this?
Yeah, there's been a significant outcry from people who would not normally necessarily align themselves with Don Lemon's views, or indeed the manner in which he often expresses them. I mean, this is someone who was quite a character on CNN when he was anchoring there, now is pursuing his own media strategy for his own company. He, of course, has a history of crossing President Donald Trump, so there are questions about whether this was politically motivated directly from the White House, these moves against him and Ms. Fort. But yes, I think we are seeing journalists across the spectrum. I mean, although not, of course, from Trump-leaning right-wing outlets and propaganda outlets, expressing grave concern about the direction of travel here for journalists. And Vanessa, not just in terms of criminal prosecution, but here in Washington, D.C., you know, Jeff Bezos, who, of course, bankrolled that documentary all about Melania Trump. He owns the Washington Post.
Yes.
And he's about to fire, it is suggested here, as almost half the staff at the Washington Post. I mean, significant cutbacks coming in the Washington Post's international coverage, its local coverage, a complete retooling of a newspaper that has been considered by many here to be a national treasure. And you're seeing journalists from all over the spectrum speaking out against that as well.
All right, I just have to ask you, we haven't got very long, but about the Melania documentary, and I just declare my hand. I have no interest at all, apart from being very interested excited. I'm paying my own money this evening to go and see it. And I've been told by anybody and everybody, Vanessa, the first thing you've got to do is count the number of empty seats in the cinema. Don't count how many people are there, count how many people are not there. But I am paying and I am seeing, and I'm really doing it on behalf of the lovely LBC listeners, so they don't have to go and see it. Have you seen it? If you haven't, and if you have, what do you know about it? What do you think?
I have not seen it. I would be very interested to find out what you think of it. I am going to go and see it. Once the news gives me enough of an opening to go and see it.
Yeah.
Look, this is an extraordinarily expensive documentary. So if it's not impressive, that will be, I think, a bit of a blow. Amazon spent $40 million on this documentary. Remember that Melania is not just the star. She's the executive producer of it.
Yeah.
They've since spent another $35 million promoting it. And, of course, this is not Jeff Bezos only trying to provide money for a creative endeavour. I mean, he's trying to obviously buy himself influence within the White House by engaging in that kind of expenditure. But, you know, it's not just a documentary. There is a plan for her next to be producing a docu-series for Amazon. I believe 5 parts. This is just the amuse-bouche. This is just the appetizer.
Oh, my God.
There's even more to come.
Oh, no,
so
not also
yourself.
About her, the 5-part series, not about Melania.
Yes, no, absolutely.
You're joking?
Of course, absolutely.
Oh, my God. Well, I'm going to have to fortify myself before I go and subject myself to this evening, but I am going. It is voluntarily, not under duress. I felt it was my bounden duty after all these years. We maybe can convene again next week, Simon, and discuss it. Thank you so much for joining me. Always a great delight to have you, and always the most absolutely eye-rolling stories from America, courtesy of Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent.